Science is not only collection of facts. You could collect those facts, but the conclusion drawn based on that fact is what makes science really science. My name is Gulmammad Mammadov, and I am a faculty member at TRT University in Baku, Azerbaijan. I teach physics. Salam. Hello, how are you? How's everyone doing? Doing all right? Today is our first lecture in Physics 1. I come from a remote mountain village in Laçın region of Azerbaijan, which was occupied by Armenia 3 decades ago. Our first topic is the nature of physics. I will explain how we make observations, how we postulate new theories, we come up with new laws, principles, etc. I lived in this village for 8 years. Our village had a beautiful nature. We had a beautiful house. We had a healthy life, green mountains. We had springs, waterfalls. We had a beautiful river. The nature was like a little paradise. We had a happy life there. We were living our lives peacefully in that part of the world. When Soviet Union was going toward collapsing, Armenia used this opportunity to essentially take that area of Azerbaijani territories, known as Nagorno-Karabakh, and annex it to Armenia. It was clear to us that civilian population of Azerbaijan were being attacked and massacred by the Armenian military. So we were very scared that the same fate was waiting for us. Then a few months after Khojalı massacre, in fact, Laçın, including our village, was attacked and occupied by Armenia. This was a very violent process in which many of my relatives were killed on spot and many were taken hostages. The rest of us ran essentially for our lives. We left all our belongings behind, just escaping our village to survive essentially. We could feel imminent death, that it could happen in time soon. But we were lucky, fortunate that my family survived. We managed to come out of there in one piece as a family. From Laçın, we escaped to Ağcabədi. All IDPs, internal displaced people from Laçın region, ended up settling there in that empty land temporarily. We lived there for 10 years with the hope that we would return, but that never happened. The place we ended up was an extremely warm place in summer, in winter extremely cold. We didn't have drinkable water nearby. We had to go 6-7 kilometers to get drinkable water from one artisan well. Just plain soil, middle of nowhere. We didn't have any infrastructure. So we didn't have school, we didn't have a hospital. When I look at this place, I remember people crying. I remember difficult times when we wouldn't have food because the humanitarian aid, food wouldn't be enough. So fights on scarce resources was one of them. People would die and they couldn't call any doctor, so people would just die and everyone would be sad, crying, like helpless, like a bunch of people with no one out there to look after them. There is also a place where many of my wishes as a child died, I could not realize. When I look at that picture, I want to forget. I just don't want to even remember the details of life there. All we had were some textbooks given to us as humanitarian aid. Some textbooks were given to us by the Minister of Education. And I remember my father would tell us, well, here are the books, you can study by yourself. We don't have a school, but you have to study. Okay, your future, brighter future will come with education. You have to study these things. At one point, I was going through these textbooks, looking at the pictures, colored pictures, and I saw an image of train, cars, TV, radio, and I looked at the textbook. The cover of the textbook said physics. When I realized that those pictures were in physics textbook, that was the first time I realized that I should study physics. So I took these books. I asked my father. My father said, if you want to study physics, you have to study math, you have to study geometry, etc. Then you can study physics. So I took these textbooks, started from the first grade all the way to 11th grade. When I was preparing for a university, kids who were my age, they knew that I was preparing for entering a university. They would know that I was doing something almost sacred, but they did not believe that it was possible for a person who is not going to school, doesn't have a mentor, just taking by himself the textbooks and studies by himself and can enter a university. But this happened. When this happened, I remember the news spread everywhere. Like in our region, these IDP settlements, everyone knew that there's a kid who studied by himself. He didn't go to any school and he entered to the top university of the country. I would say thousands of IDP kids started to see me as an example, as a role model. And this in itself put additional responsibility on my shoulders to do my best, because I realized that I could not fail. If I failed, that failure would not be just my failure. It would be failure of those thousands of children. So I kept going. I was 17 years old when I moved to Baku. That's when I entered Baku State University. So when I approached this university, I looked at it and I did not believe that I achieved. I was a student of that university. I felt so small before that university. So in July I entered the university, and in September the school was going to open. We didn't have enough budget for me to rent an apartment for me to stay and go to school. During this 1 month, I and my brother had to build a small room using discarded materials that were dumped in as trash. And I stayed there for 1 year. But this room wasn't fully renovated. Between rocks, I could see outside. But it never affected my studies. For me, it didn't matter. It was enough for me to have a desk and just study. The desire to study was so strong in me that everything else diminished near that desire. All the grades I got were the highest grades. In fact, when I graduated Baku State University, I was first of the class because my GPA was 4.0 out of 4. All my family, my sisters, brothers, all of them worked to save everything they earned so that I could have just an average meal every day and afford my bus fare. It was so difficult for us. and they stood behind me. This is also very important. If they did not do that, I couldn't continue my education. My first goal was to come out of that IDP camp. When I came to Baku, my goal was to study well and have the highest grades possible. I was studying very well. At the same time, I set another goal for myself to get even better education, world-class education abroad. And I applied to the Abdus International Center for Theoretical Physics in Italy, and I got admitted into a year-long diploma program to study high-energy physics. But this wasn't enough for me. I wanted to pursue my academic goals at the PhD level. I approached my professors there. They recommended me to apply to graduate schools in the United States, and I did. And I got admitted into PhD program of Syracuse University in New York State. So I thought I was going to be comfortable in the United States as well. I thought the culture would be the same, but when I went to the United States, I realized that what I saw in Italy was completely different, and I had to adjust myself to that environment. This was in addition to the challenges of academic environment. Despite all these challenges, I managed to adapt to the new environment and succeed in my academic goals, which was to go until the end of the path that leads one to a doctoral degree.
Gulmammad Mammadov, Doctor of Philosophy in Physics, Advisor Kenneth Foster.
10 years I lived in the United States, and during this period I feel like I went through a complete transition of changing. Like I went into the United States as one person, came out of it a completely different person. While studying in the United States, I never forgot that I was a role model for kids I left in the IDP settlement. So when I was working toward achieving my goal, I faced many challenges. While overcoming those challenges, I always remember that there are thousands of IDP kids back in my country, in the settlement I left behind, that look up on me as a role model. So I knew that I could not fail, and my ultimate goal was to achieve all this, get experience, get world-class education, become a world-class scientist, educator, and return back to my country to serve my country. I often visit IDP schools. I meet children there. When I look at these kids, I see myself in them. I emotionally engage with them because I come from the same background. They can relate to me, I can relate to them, their experiences, and this is very important for them. They get encouraged that they should study. It's very important for them to see a real example that if they study, they can build a better life for themselves. When they see me, I stand before them as a real example, and I tell them, you can improve your life, you can get out of any challenge, any difficulty by choosing the path of education. Education, getting education will never fail you. In general, in our schools, this is the case. We don't teach hate to our children. They learn to be responsible toward the environment, toward society, toward the world in general. Armenia itself is responsible for inflicting so much pain upon me personally. I essentially lost very significant part of my childhood because of Armenia's occupation, ethnic cleansing policy toward us. But do I feel hate toward Armenians as people? I don't feel hate toward Armenians. What I blame for all this is the ideology, nationalist ideology, state policy that's ethnic cleansing, occupation toward its neighbor. This is what I blame for all the pain inflicted upon me and hundreds of thousands of other people like me. The reason we come to this mountain is that we cannot go back to our home, which is in Laçın. This mountain is very special for us because it has many similarities to the nature we had around our village. It reminds us how life used to be there. We feel like we are at home. We long for returning back to our home. So this is, in a way, it comforts us. This is a spiritual, in a way, it's a spiritual journey for us. For 30 years, we haven't been able to visit even the graveyards of our relatives. This is very painful for us. I just want Armenia to return our lands and let us return back to our homes and build our lives over there. I really want to return back to my home, to where I spent my childhood. I didn't have a normal childhood. I didn't have an opportunity to go to school. I didn't have a chance to live a happy childhood because of war. Even today, I remember the traumas I got as a child when war took place while we were living in the IDP settlement. So I do not want my child to experience the same fate. I want her to grow in a peaceful world, and I will do everything possible to make sure that she lives in a better world. We have many differences within societies, between cultures existing in different countries. There are differences, and the differences are beautiful. But we should focus on our similarities rather than differences. We should promote what connects us, what is common. As a physicist, when sometimes I think about our place in the universe, when I imagine, I look at Earth from outside, outer space. Earth it feels like a small home. This petty fights, wars seem so meaningless when you look at Earth from outside. And I think with that mindset, with the mindset of a physicist, we can build a better world, better future by realizing that the whole planet is our home.